So like one of the things you could be doing is setting the height of your ceiling. There was a house that I worked on, really fancy house. They wanted to drop the ceiling down because the house had been added onto since the 40s, and it had one room over here and one room over there, and all kind of went different directions. So they wanted to lower it and all be perfectly flat. And so I used string lines. I water leveled a benchmark all the way around the room and then measured up from that mark. This will let you, and here's the going, this is turned off on the left. I'm going to turn it over to the right. And it'll fuss at you if it ain't close enough to self-level. But it also has a little bulb to pay attention to right there to get you close. Now,
and it has a gimbal in it, but it only does 4 degrees.
this is not very secure. You pan around. Now, if I had that dead on level and not moving, I could go over here. See that line right there? I could measure up from that line, or I could, if I went to the trouble, I could set the cabinets to it, which I wouldn't do. I'd measure up to it. And we could use a tape measure and measure up to it. Also, with something like this, say outside, you might need a receiver, they call it.
A laser.
But you could measure down from that line. You take a tape, why don't you give me a tape measure, Drew? A tape measure down or up. But like if you wanted your driveway to go down 1 inch per 10 feet, you just measure over 10 feet and then down further 1 inch from what it is over there next to it. And you could have your fall that way. Or if you want it level all the way across, you measure down. That's what you would do. And it's about math up and down. Off finished floor if it's concrete, after finished floor rather, AFF on the prints. But also on soffits. So if you wanted to set a soffit like this beam right here, you want to set a height and go all the way around the room, you would measure up. He's trying to give me a baby tape measure. That would have been, let me see that. This would be not what you want to use on a construction site if you had a choice. But if you had no choice, you would use this. But, you see that line?
Yeah, right there on the tape measure.
It goes 40.
And he's going all the way to the ceiling.
And you could do that all across the room. And then you can also measure down. So if you wanted to set dirt, or if you wanted to level up a floor in an old house that was settled down, you didn't want to jack it up, I suppose you could do that. But you could go further, as you go further and further out, you can drop down what you plan on doing for the dirt outside. But a soffit would allow you to measure up to the bottom of that soffit, set your line and your material. If you know your drywall is 1/2 inch plus 1/8 inch of drywall mud, it would be 5/8 of an inch up would be your framing. And you'd be measuring up from that line, whatever inches you want it to be up. Okay? Now, that's not all this thing does. It's pretty wicked in that it can do a lot of different things for this just little bit of money. So we're gonna, horizontal is H. You just touch it, you don't gotta push it. And we're gonna do it again. See that 2 lines. Isn't that cool? Now I'm gonna do it one more time and it'll disappear. And then we're gonna go over here to vertical. Now if you wanted to set a wall and you pop the line, this is where I want it, but it's 20 foot up. Well, a plumb bob starts blowing around in the wind pretty easy. And if there's a whole lot of pipes and other things in the way, you would not be able to find it really easy. Now, what you used to do with metal stud would be you would put a hollow metal stud that's 40 foot long. When I worked at Universal Studios and MGM and so on, and the wind would still kind of curl around and blow that line. Kind of a hassle, but we did it that way. we also had lasers. Back then, in the 80s, lasers were $15,000. They were this big. You were not going to use it if you were hungover. They were in a great big old case. They were not going to let you use it if you weren't showing all your faculties available. So they were extremely expensive. Now we're down to $100, which is really, really beyond what it was back in the 80s. That's how far we've advanced. But guess what? We can still do the same thing. We could set, if we get ourselves dead on level, it would let you set way up there, 20 foot high, 40 foot high, the same as you are down here. You just got to set to that line. If you notice, it's coming out the side here. I'm going to do another one.
On the back side.
That way. See here? I'm going to do it again. Both ways. Now we're square. Now you can literally take this and go like so, and say you wanted to set your acoustical ceiling to a dead-on angle, square, but at a 45 angle, you can set your acoustical ceiling. But better than that, you can take this bracket, hang it from the beam here, let's say, or the wall there, and you could set your tile at an angle. Does that make sense? So, I haven't tried that with a floor tile. I will, because I've always had the pop lines and then let the glue dry and you could see it when it's where I wanted it to be. But if I have this, I don't have to have any chop lines or anything else. It will set right there. That's pretty neat. And if I want to adjust it just a little bit, there's a dial right here. Now all I got to do is turn it just a little bit to fine tune it. Isn't that cool? Then, in the middle of all that, is the ability to have the, I think that one's called
Burst.
Burst is inside, a little easier to see for longer distance.
Brighter applications.
Particularly when you're outside and you have a lot of light, say sunlight. It kind of picks it up where it wasn't before. If it was constant and with the sun, you wouldn't be able to see it as easy. Although green is more visible than red. So there's a lot of good choices on this thing. And I'm going to do something here. Just like that. Just touch it. Don't forget we have that remote control. So there's a lot of really neat things. The remote control is right here. Put it on your keychain if you get attached to it. I don't want to lose my remote. Put an air tag on your remote. It's bigger than the remote. Also, there's every time you get where it can't level itself, it's going to let you know. It's like, that's too much, I can't level myself. So you let it go and it will set itself. Again, I told you that bubble's up there, but there is a way to turn that off. You see what I did? I'm now turning it. So if you want to run an angle on the wall, say like cedar siding running at an angle, you could do it. All you gotta do is set yourself where it's sort of permanent, and there you go. That allows you to run at an angle across that.